quick word before we get started. I'm not a doctor, therapist, or mental health professional. I'm just sharing my story and the lessons I've learned along the way. If you're struggling, please reach out to a professional or someone you trust.
You don't have to carry the weight alone.
Sometimes it's not the road ahead that slows you down. It's the one behind you. The moments you can't undo. The words you wish you said. The choices that keep replaying like a highlight reel you never asked for. For years I drove like that, always glancing back, not just in racing, but in life. Trying to keep control by checking the mirrors, not realizing I was losing sight of everything in front of me. When you've lived that way long enough, your shoulders start to carry it. You start to move through life very heavy, even on days that should feel light. That's what guilt does. It doesn't yell. It just stays. Quiet, familiar, always in the corner of your eye. Today's episode is about what happens when you finally stop doing that, when you learn to drive without mirrors, to forgive yourself, to let go, and to find the forward motion again. This is the Mental Pit Stop Podcast, and you're listening to Episode 6, Racing Without Mirrors. As I normally do, we'll start off with today's affirmation. You're welcome to say it along with me. I'll say it twice. Or you can just listen. I cannot change the past, but I can change how I carry it. I cannot change the past, but I can change how I carry it. Sometimes that means putting the car in neutral just for a moment and saying, I'm not my mistakes anymore. I'm not the person I used to be. As I've done in episode 5, I've broken the episode down into 3 parts. As I will continue to do so, I just find it's easier with the flow when I'm writing it all out. Part 1, objects in the mirror. My mom was one of those people who was always in my mirror. Always looking back thinking, why was I so stubborn? We had our silence, our distance, and I kept telling myself, we'll talk later. I'll call her tomorrow. Later never came. And that word later became one of the heaviest things I've ever carried. It's wild how you can be so sure there's always going to be time. You tell yourself next week, tomorrow, next call, next visit. But that time doesn't always wait for you to be ready. I carried that guilt for years, that kind that sits quietly just under the surface. And the worst part is no one sees it. We continue to say, we're okay. We continue to lie to our family, our friends, but deep down, we know we're not okay. You laugh at work, you laugh with family, friends. You still have that quiet ache that follows you home. So the objects in my mirror besides my mom were also soldiers. The ones we lost. That became even more complex. Object in my mirror. It didn't matter if I was sitting at home and heard the news of a Canadian soldier killed. I'd turn on the TV or look on my phone and see if it was somebody I knew. Eventually, I stopped doing that. I became numb to the feeling of loss and grief. It didn't matter if I was right there beside him or seeing it on the news. The objects in my mirror were guilt. I would often think to myself as I would run this replay through my head over the years, did I train them well enough? Did I miss something? Were they mentally resilient? What could I have done differently? Probably the biggest guilt that I carried with me for the longest time, especially many of the soldiers I lost being young, just beginning their lives, I would often say, why wasn't it me? Those questions don't go away overnight. They echo in the quiet. They sneak into your thoughts when you least expect it. You wake up in the middle of the night with nightmares. You see someone in the grocery store that reminds you of a soldier, and it takes you back to that place right away. You sit in traffic, listening to music, and your mind races with objects in the mirror. It's not about being dramatic. It's about the weight of responsibility, the kind only a leader or a mentor really understand. You carry the idea that you should have been able to protect them all, even when you know deep down the war and life doesn't work like that. We know that. That kind of guilt doesn't fade easy. It settles in, and the more you stare at it, the less you see the road ahead. Looking back too long doesn't fix the past. It just blinds you on the road ahead. Reflection only helps if it's paired with forgiveness. Otherwise, it becomes a loop. The same lap, the same track, the same mistake, the same weight on your chest. If you've ever carried something like that, a name, a face, a memory, trauma, you don't have to forget to move forward. You just have to stop and let it drive. I'll have a couple of reflection questions for you throughout the podcast to pop in the comments. The first one is, what's that object in your mirror? What mirror do you keep checking, even though you know the race has moved on? If you want to pop something in the comments, if you're open and have the courage to do so, add in the comments what is either one thing now that you wish you could let go of, not to necessarily forget, but to move forward and stop looking in your mirror. Or maybe it's something you've already succeeded. Maybe it's in the very distant past in your mirror. Part 2 is the blind spot. In racing and in the military, we're trained to always check our surroundings. As we would say in the military, check our 6. You've got my 6, I've got your 6. Awareness can save your life, and I believe in many of my situations it has. I've always been very aware of my surroundings. But off the track in the real world, that same instinct can become a trap. You can start scanning for threats that don't exist anymore. You brace for impact before anything's even happened. You live like you're still in the middle of a mission, even when the war is long over. I used to think that vigilance meant I was strong. That being switched on, as we used to say in the military, was the same as being in control. But over time, I realized I wasn't living, I was just surviving, one day at a time. Even in peace, I was still at war with my thoughts. For years and years, I replayed old failures, old conversations, old memories, old fears, and old traumatic events. I told myself it was awareness, but deep down, it was really anxiety disguised as disciplined. I wasn't being honest and truthful to myself. And here's the thing about always checking the mirrors. You can't see what's right beside you. You miss the people waving you in for a pit stop. And we talked about your pit crew in a previous episode. Who's your pit crew that's going to say, hey, you're not alone, pull in. You need to take a pit stop. We need to look at that damage under your hood. Sometimes that damage it isn't visible. It's the exhaustion you hide, the tension in your jaw, the way you avoid eye contact when somebody asks if you're okay. And that's why I started, it's okay to say you're not okay. I said in a previous podcast as well, a friend and a colleague that I lost, I spoke to shortly before they ended their life. And the answer I got was, I'm okay. We get so good at covering it up. Soldiers, racers, parents, leaders. we become wearing that mask. We think the strong thing is to keep going, but strength isn't endurance. Strength is honesty. You have to be honest with yourself. But stubbornness doesn't like pit stops. Stubbornness says, I've got this. And then shame comes along and says, yeah, I agree. You should have had this already. And then guilt comes along, and all three of them, stubbornness, shame, and guilt, they all have a conversation in your head. The truth is you can't see your own blind spots. That's why we have our pit crew. That's why teams exist. That's why we have pit crews, battle buddies, and friends. People who can see what we can't. People who can see your telemetry and remind us that checking in isn't weakness, it's wisdom. I'll be honest, learning a lot of this, and I've had my struggles with ups and downs, setbacks, but it's taken me years of therapy to let go of so much guilt, shame. Trust doesn't come easy when you have to be the one that's always holding it together. You often become not trustworthy of yourself. But the more I let people in, the more I realized that every time I stopped pretending I was fine, someone else would speak up and say, me too. I need help. And that's why I've started the Mental Pit Stop. A place that people can say it's okay that I'm not okay. And once you get to that point, that's when the real healing starts. And that's where I finally feel I am starting to get to now. I used to think that forgiving myself meant forgetting, but I've learned it's the opposite. Forgiveness isn't remembering without reliving. It's being able to look back without getting stuck there. It's realizing that guilt isn't proof of love. Growth is. Reflection question number 2. As we talked about before, who's in your pit crew? Who are you going to allow to look out for your blind spots? Part 3. Eyes on the apex. There's a point in every corner. Racers call it the apex. It's the split second when everything lines up, the steering, the throttle, the focus. You hit it not by looking back, but by trusting the line ahead. When I finally started forgiving myself, it wasn't a big hurrah moment. It wasn't a big speech. It was quiet. Through a lot of therapy, I decided to make a small decision, and I just had to not carry all of this guilt and shame with me anymore. I couldn't keep looking in the mirror and seeing what was behind me because I was losing focus on the next apex. That's the thing about forgiveness. It's not an event, it's a habit. Some days you'll wake up and feel light. Other days, that same weight tries to climb back in the car with you. But each time you choose grace over guilt, you build a new pattern, one lap at a time. Letting go isn't about forgetting the people or the pain or the trauma. It's about releasing yourself from the punishment that you put yourself through. Because you're not the same person. I know I'm not the same person I was last week. Some weeks are better than others. I am certainly not the same person I was years ago. I've learned, I've grown, I've earned a new lap, a new chapter at the stage I am in my life. I just wanted to share a couple ideas, and I don't necessarily want to say tips. I'm simply talking about where I am in my life, things that have helped me. I know there's people out there that have been through much, much worse than I have, but when I continue to work on myself and be brave and have the courage, that's when the healing really starts. The first thing I would say is share your story. When you speak it out loud, the shame, the guilt, the regrets, they lose grip on the track. Someone else hears it and realizes they're not the only one stuck in reverse. The other one would be practicing patience. I was so hard on myself so many times because I went back to looking in my mirrors, seeing what was behind me, and I beat myself up over that. But over time, I realized I had to be more patient with myself, allow myself to move at a steady pace, consistent laps. You don't have to feel ready to move on every day. Sometimes you just have to get started. And those habits and the readiness, that will all grow in time. The two other things I would say are somewhat connected, and that would be journaling and affirmations. I would stand in front of my mirror in the morning, brushing my teeth, not brushing my teeth and talking at the same time. I would brush my teeth, and then whether I had my notebook there or I had sticky notes on my mirror, I would say things aloud to myself. I'm strong. I'm courageous. I don't need to live with this guilt. I did what I could at the time. I can't continue to keep looking back. I need to look forward. And the last one would be journaling, whether it's writing a letter, writing poetry, something where you can express your thoughts, whether it's getting them out loud for an affirmation or writing them down on a piece of paper. At least you're getting them out of your head. The more I practiced these things, the lighter my life got. Not because my past disappeared, because I stopped letting it steer. And I realized when I wrote that, that rhymes. Not because the past disappeared, but because I stopped letting it steer. You can't change what's behind you. You can't choose how it feels you. That's a choice. That's your apex. You're the one that needs to decide, today's the day. In being patient with myself, I'm going to make a little step and move forward and not let today's be impacted by the past. The last reflection question. Feel free to add your comment below when you're listening to this. What's the one thing that you're ready to release today? What's the one thing that you are no longer going to constantly, daily, hourly look in your mirror? And I think the last one is kind of interesting, would be, who could you be if you stopped living like you still owed a past debt? And that's probably the one for me that I realized I had so much more in life, in future, that I wanted to be here. I wasn't suicidal because I felt that if I continued on living with the shame and the guilt, it would just tear me apart. It would eat me up. And it did. But I'm very thankful that through tools available, resources, and therapy, and even in the last 10 months that I've been part of the Gran Turismo community, you guys have embraced, inspired, and I'm so happy that I've found this place to be part of. In closing, I just want to say, when you stop living in the mirrors, something beautiful happens. The world, your life opens up. Your breathing evens out. Your shoulders loosen up. You start to notice the track, not just the marks you left on it. You realize that forgiving yourself doesn't mean the story ends. It just means the next chapter has finally come, and there's room in your book to write another chapter. Because once you stop staring back, you finally see what's waiting up ahead, whether it's a car on the track that you're trying to track down, trying to gain more time, and possibly have an overtake. Next week, we'll talk about that moment when you stop hesitating, stop second guessing, and take your shot. Episode 7, the overtake, pushing past fear. Because letting go is one thing, but moving forward, that's where you find out what you're really made of. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments of not only this episode, whether you like the frequency of every Sunday being able to start your week listening to a podcast. I'd encourage you, if you feel that you have somebody in your pit crew, in your life, in the community, family, friends that you feel could benefit from these podcasts, please share it with them. Remember, it's okay to say you're not okay. This is the Mental Pit Stop podcast, where it's not about perfection, it's about progress.
Yeah. It's okay. Life's a track, some nights it's heavy, some days it's light. We all spin out, still finding control through the fight. Some laps alone, some laps are slow, but every turn reminds you how much you've grown. You can lose some grip, you can lose your way, but it's okay to say you're not okay. The mental pit stop.